In my previous video, I demoed an app called Let Me Talk. It's a communication app that can help foster more appropriate functional communication for your child. Today, I'm going to give you a presentation called How to Teach requesting an item by pushing one button in a communication app. So the only thing we're going to do is teach our kids how to push a button to tell us what they want, just one. Okay, before we get started, here's some useful definitions that you're going to want to know. So a trial, what do I mean by the word trial? So basically a trial is the time it takes a child to complete the behavior targeted for learning. So in this case, the behavior targeted for learning is touching the correct button to request an item when asked the question, what do you want? So a trial is complete after the child touches the correct button. Also, you want to make sure to give the child what they ask for before starting a new trial. So, because the point of this is to teach them a more functional way to ask for the things that they like. So, if they touch the button chip and we don't give them the chip, they're not going to see that as a way to gain access to chips. So basically, every time that they touch the button or touch a button, we give them the thing that they ask for. If they get upset, that's an opportunity to say, tell me what you want again. So, just be like, is that not what you wanted? Show me what you want. And then you can reintroduce, the communication app to them. The next definition that we're going to talk about is a prompt hierarchy. A prompt hierarchy involves using increasingly less invasive prompts by fading those prompts out over time to promote independence for a specific behavior. So basically, you fade the invasiveness of the prompting by one level for the next trial after a certain number of consecutive trials with a correct response. So basically, in this case, we're looking for 3 consecutive trials where the kid touches the correct button, and then using our current level of prompting, and then we're going to move to the next least invasive prompt for the 4th trial, the one that's upcoming. I know that's kind of confusing, and it's going to get a little more confusing on the next 2 slides, but I've created some flow charts to help you visualize what I'm talking about, and I'll go over those afterwards. So first off, what is a prompt hierarchy? I went over that briefly. Again, it involves using increasingly less invasive prompts by fading them out over time to promote independence for a specific behavior, and that is a mouthful. So basically, you start at the bottom of the pyramid with full physical prompting. You do that for a couple of trials in a row. Then you fade the full physical out and you start with the partial physical prompting. So you say, what do you want? You full physical prompt the response. You do say that again. What do you want? You prompt the full physical response. And say, what do you want? And then you prompt again the full physical response. All right, now you've done that 3 times in a row. Now it's time to move on to the partial physical prompt. So then you use the partial physical prompt. You're aiming to try to get 3 times in a row at partial physical prompting of them touching the correct button. And then if they do that 3 times in a row, then it's time to fade the partial physical to gestural prompting. So then, they get 3 times in a row of that. We're going to fade all prompting for this particular instance. You could use a visual prompt if they cannot go from gestural prompt to independent prompting, but I just put visual in there on our hierarchy just in case they struggle with independence after we remove prompting following 3 correct trials with gestural prompting. So basically, for teaching a new button, each time your child touches the correct button for 3 trials in a row, use the next step on the prompt hierarchy. And to correct an error, use increasingly more intrusive prompts until they touch the correct button. So, i.e., we move 1 step at a time down the pyramid until we get the independent response, or we get the correct response that we're looking for. So let's say we started off saying, what do you want? And we knew we were going to be using a gestural prompt but they don't get it right on the gestural prompt. So then we move to a partial physical and hope that they get it right. Then if they don't get it right, then we go to a full physical and prompt the correct response before giving them the chip. And basically that's how you do it. Now remember, at the next trial after you've corrected an error, you return to the step on the pyramid you started at for the previous trial. So in the example I just gave, we were asking, what do you want? And then using a gestural prompt to prompt our child to respond correctly. And we weren't able to get, a correct response. So we did error correction, ended up having to use a full physical prompt by the end of it. But now we're doing a new trial. We're going to go back to using the gestural prompt again. So we started at gestural on the previous trial. We had to correct all the way using a full physical. On the new trial, we go back to the gestural prompt. I know that sounds confusing, and even one more slide is going to make it sound even more confusing, but hopefully the visuals that follow will clear everything up. So these are the step-by-step instructions for requesting an item using one button. So first thing we got to do, we got to get out our materials. So we need to get out one item, activity, or go near a location. So basically, what I mean by going near a location is if you're trying to teach your kid how to touch a button that says outside to request for going outside, the easiest way to do that is to ask or have them request going outside while standing next to the door that leads to outside. Basically, you want to make these situations contextually appropriate. If you've got like a table in the kitchen and that's where your child eats, maybe work on food words in the kitchen or at the table where they eat. If you're working on like toys, work on requesting toys where the toys are stored. Basically that's how we want to teach it. Go to where these things are located in the natural environment, and then ask your kid to come there, and then work on teaching the button in that setting. So then after we've got our items and our iPad set up, we're going to open the app in the iPad and navigate to the item's corresponding category. So if we're using food, we're going to go to the food category and already open that menu up for them. Then it's time to ask your child to come to the work area. Once they're situated in the work area and ready to work, you show them what they're working for and show them what you have available and say, what do you want? So in this instance, I got chips. So I'm trying to get this student to request chips by touching the chips button. So after I say, what do you want? I'm going to wait 1 to 3 seconds for the kid to respond. And then I'm going to prompt using a prompt hierarchy. So remember, at the bottom of our period, we got full physical. So we're going to start at full physical. If there is but only if there's no response for 1 to 3 seconds. So basically the first couple trials, maybe your kid already knows how to do this and they can surprise you, and that's going to help you skip a lot of steps. But if they don't, that's why we leave that 1 to 3 seconds. So, so they can hop in and show you they know how to use the device. If they don't, then we're going to prompt after those 1 to 3 seconds. And the reason I say 1 to 3 seconds is because, each kid has different response times. Some kids might be fast and like hear what you're saying and immediately respond. Some might need a little more time to process that language. So, they need longer to process, give them the full 3 seconds. If you find that they're responding a lot faster than 3 seconds, you don't have to wait the full 3 seconds. Just get a feel for how long it takes your child to hear what you're saying, process it, and then engage in the physical response of touching the button. And make sure that you give your child what they ask for after each trial as soon as the correct response occurs. Again, I said earlier, that's because we want them to associate touching the button with getting the thing that they asked for. So we gotta, especially when they're learning a new button, we gotta honor that request like immediately and every time. Once they've learned it and mastered it, we can start introducing the word no, and we'll talk about that in a later video. So basically, this is where it gets complicated. So you're going to repeat steps 4 through 6 until you complete three consecutive trials with correct response using the current level of prompting. So we need 3 trials in a row where we get full physical prompting before we fade the prompting to attempt 3 trials in a row of partial physical prompting, and then we need correct responses 3 trials in a row for partial physical before we can fade to gestural, and then 3 trials in a row at gestural before we can fade to before we can just fade all prompting out. But that's basically the sequence here. That's what all of this explains, and you can review that more if you want. But the long-term goal here is the child has mastered the skill after 8 to 10 correct responses across 10 consecutive trials when prompting is removed for 5 to 10 seconds. So we're going to aim for 20 trials per button per day. So any button you're trying to teach, if it's a new button, you got to set up 20 opportunities for them to ask for the thing, touching that button per day until they learn it and master it. And then after they master it, then you can just do like 3 to 5 times, a couple times, 3 to 5 times per day, a couple times per week. And then, maybe, honestly, just correct the errors as they come up after they've mastered it. If you do encounter errors by falling back on your prompt hierarchy. But more than likely, you're not going to have any issues once they've learned a button for something that's highly preferred. All right, so if you're still with me, I know that was confusing, but hopefully this will clarify more. Here is a flow chart of what it would look like for fading the prompts when your child makes no error. So trial 1, we're gonna use a full physical prompt to get the correct response. Then we're gonna give the kid what they asked for. Then trial 2, we're gonna say again, what do you want? We're gonna use a full physical prompt to help the child touch the correct response. Then we're gonna give them what they asked for. Then trial 3, same thing. What do you want? And we're gonna give the child what they asked for. So now that they've touched the right button, 3 times in a row between trials 1, 2, and 3, now we're gonna fade our prompt to the next level. We're gonna go to a partial physical prompt. So partial physical prompt, we get 3 trials in a row where they're responding correctly to the question, what do you want, with just the use of a partial physical prompt. Then for the 7th trial, for trial number 7, we're gonna fade the prompting to just a gestural prompt. And if we get 3 trials in a row where they're touching the correct button with just the use of a gestural prompt, then we're gonna take out all prompting. So we're gonna not deliver a prompt for 5 to 10 seconds. Again, that's based on your child's response time. Kids that respond faster, we're gonna wait for 5 seconds. Kids that take a longer time to process the language and respond, we're going to give them about 10 seconds. So what we need is 8 out of 10 correct responses across 10 consecutive trials. So basically, after you've removed prompting, they're allowed to make 2 mistakes out of every 10 trials. And then if they, those 10 trials in a row, you get at least 8 out of 10 correct. That's when you know the kid has mastered the button and it's time to teach a new button. But let's talk about what happens when your child makes a mistake. So what you do, similar. So basically look through here. Trial 1, 2, and 3, full physical. Everything was right. Trial 4, they got a correct response with partial physical. But oops, trial 5, we tried that partial physical prompt again, but they did not touch the right button with us just using partial physical. Maybe they touched the one right next to it, or they didn't, They didn't get anywhere near it. That's when you fade in the more intrusive prompt, which was the one we were using before, which was the full physical prompt. So then we're going to use our full physical prompt to correct the response and give them the thing that they asked for. Now then when we go back to trial 6, now we're starting all over, trying to get 3 times in a row of them touching the correct button with partial physical. So trial 6, 7, and 8, let's assume they get it correct, touch the correct button with the partial physical prompting. Then we can move to the gestural prompting for trial 9. They get it right with the gestural prompting for trial 9. Great. We try that again on trial 10, but no, they don't get the correct answer. They don't touch the right button with the gestural prompt. So now we're going to have to use a partial physical prompt and hope they touch the right button. If they don't touch the right button after the partial physical, then we got to move to the full physical prompt if necessary to touch the correct response. So then, after they've done that, again, we're going to go back to where we started at the beginning of trial 10. So we're going to try to get 10 trials in a row, or 3 trials in a row where they get the correct response of touching the right button with us just gesturally prompting the response. So trial 11, 12, and 13, great, they did it. Awesome. So we're going to fade out the gestural prompting for trial 14. So they get the correct response with no prompting for 5 to 10 seconds in place. That's great. Then trial 15, oh, nope, they didn't respond correctly when there wasn't any prompting within that 5 to 10 second time frame. So first, we're going to try to use a gestural prompt to prompt the correct response. If there's still no correct response, then we're going to try partial physical. And then if there's still no correct response, then we're going to try the full physical to get that correct response of touching the correct button. And then, basically, we're going to go back to just trying to get, 8 out of 10 trials in a row of them touching the correct button with no prompting in place for 5 to 10 seconds. Now, basically, every time you encounter an error, when you're working without prompting for 5 to 10 seconds, just refer back to what happened in trial 15 for how you would respond to correcting an error, and then start back over for the new trial with no prompting in place. Hopefully that visual helped explain it more. If you're still with me, thank you for bearing with me. Now here is some more information about each type of prompting. So I'm going to give you some visuals about how you do each type of physical prompting. So this is our full physical prompt. You use full physical prompting when first starting to teach a new button. So we're going to use this for our first 3 trials. And then we're going to fade to partial physical prompting for the trial after that. And again, don't forget to give the requested item after each response. So if you see in the top picture, that's what it looks like with you doing a full physical prompt. And then, at the bottom, that's you giving the kid what they asked for. In this case, they're asking for chips. So here's a better visual. How do you do a full physical prompt? It's kind of 4 steps. Step 1, you're going to have to take their hand and make sure you're going to help them make a fist and place your fingers over theirs with your opposite hand. And of course, like the child's hand is the one that is in the blue glove. So then, after you have helped them make a fist and you've placed your fingers over their hand, then you're going to wrap your thumb over their thumb like you see in picture 2. And then after that, if you look at picture 3, then you place your index finger under their index finger to help them extend that index finger into a pointing motion. And then after that, you're going to guide their hand and finger to touch the correct button. So after they do that 3 times in a row, then you're going to fade the physical prompting out to a partial physical prompt. So partial physical prompting is displayed in the picture. You're basically just going to grab the kid's wrist instead of their hand and help guide their hand to the correct area, and hope that they use their hand, their finger, to touch the right button. So again, if the child touches the correct button for 3 trials in a row with physical prompting or partial physical prompting in place, then we're going to use gestural prompting for the start of the next trial. And of course, if we got to correct an error, we're going to use full physical prompting to correct that error, and then we're going to return to physical prompting for the next trial. And we're going to start over with our aim for 3 correct trials in a row. And again, don't forget to give them the thing that they asked for after each correct response. So they've gotten through the full physical prompting and the partial physical prompting with at least 3 consecutive trials in a row for each. So you're going to use your gestural prompting. So that involves just you pointing to the correct answer and waiting for the child to respond by touching the correct button. So after 3 trials of that, if the child touches the correct button with you just using gestural, then we're just going to take all prompting out for the trial after that. Of course, if you encounter an error, you're going to have to fade in partial physical prompting, and then if there's still an error, you're going to have to go back to your full physical prompt if necessary. And then at the start of the next trial, we're going to start all over again with trying to get 3 in a row using gestural prompting. And also, don't forget to give them what they asked for after each correct response. So this is independent responding. So they've done well. They've gotten three trials in a row of touching the right button, using gestural prompting as our method of prompting a response. Now we're going to say, what do you want? And then we're going to wait 5 or 10 seconds for the child to respond. If they respond independently by just touching the button, so they hear our question, they respond independently by touching the button. That's great. We're looking for them to do that 8 out of 10 trials in a row. So what we need is, across 10 consecutive trials, when prompting is delayed for 5 or 10 seconds, they got to get at least 8 of those trials correct. And of course, we're going to give each item. We're going to give them the item after each correct response. And then after they've gotten those 8 out of 10 trials in a row, we're gonna teach a new button. And also, right after they master it, just make sure you practice like 3 to 5 times a day, a few days per week, to make sure that they're still using the button independently. Over time, you won't have to do as much practice. Maybe reduce practice to once a week, then maybe once a month, until you're pretty confident that they remember how to use it. And also, you're seeing them use it in daily life outside of like just doing sitting at the table and working on communication. The long-term goal is that they're going to see this device as their voice, and they're going to carry it around with them, and they're going to use that to communicate to you their wants and their needs. And eventually, long-term goal is that they'll start to have more conversational abilities, like be able to comment on stuff, tell you about their day, tell you how they're feeling, stuff like that. But right now, we're just working on requesting stuff. Also, if you do see your child starts engaging in a problem behavior to get a preferred item, what we're going to do, we're going to open the app. We're going to go to the page that item is on. We're going to show them the app, and we're going to say, what do you want? So let's say one of our kids likes to bite their hands every time we're in the kitchen and they see the chips. We know that they've learned how to ask for chips using their app. So if they start biting their hands when you get the chips out, you're going to get the app out, you're going to get the device out, open the app, and open it to the page where the food is at, and you're going to put it in front of them and say, what do you want? And hope that they ask for it appropriately. We're not going to give them any food for biting the hand. They're only going to get the food after they touch the button. And here's the hard part. After they touch the button, we're not going to worry about what they were doing immediately before they touched the button. They could have been biting their hand up until the point where you finish saying, tell me what you want, and they touch the button. If it's like 1 second after, still reinforce the response, give them the chip because they touched the button. Don't worry about what happened right before then, because that's done. We want to be, and give them a whole lot of praise for, the touching the button. Draw the attention to that. Good job. I like how you touched the button. Thank you for telling me what you want. Here you go. Here's your chip. I like how you used your words to tell me what you want. Give them a lot of behavior specific praise so that they can help, so that'll help them, see the device as a more effective way to communicate, their wants and their needs. So that eventually over time they may stop relying on those old behaviors that have traditionally gotten them what they wanted in the past. And one last thing, this last slide, as promised, this is what you do if you're struggling to foster independence after removing the gestural prompting. So let's say we're going to use what's called a visual prompt. That involves you just showing your kid a picture of, what they should touch on the device. If they have used a picture exchange style communication book in the past, like a PEX system, I would use the visuals from that to, prompt the response. But, you can do what I did, make it yourself, or try to find, if you got your cell phone, you could find a picture on your cell phone, through Google image search to be your visual prompt. But we're only going to use this if independence was not achieved after removing gestural prompting. So what we want to do is take out gestural prompting and not prompt anymore and hope that they start doing it independently. Now, this is what you do if they don't. So we're only going to use this if independent button pushing doesn't occur for 5 consecutive trials after prompting is delayed for 5 to 10 seconds, i.e. they need to have 5 trials in a row where they don't have any independent responses. Let's say they get, say across those 5 trials they got, 3 independent, but 2 of them had to fall back to the gestural prompting. We're not going to worry about that because they're still doing some independent responding during those trials. The only time we're going to do it is we do 5 trials in a row and they haven't done it independent once. That's when we're going to try to introduce the visual prompting to our prompt hierarchy. So basically all we do is we just add that extra step. It's just like before, we want 3 trials in a row with the visual prompting, and then we're going to remove all the prompting for the next trial. And again, the removal of the prompting we need to delay for 5 to 10 seconds before we try to reintroduce prompting at the end of that trial. So again, for correcting an error, I need to correct that slide. That's not the right slide. It should say use a gestural prompt, then a partial physical prompt, then a full physical prompt, and then return to the visual prompt for the next trial. Aim for 3 correct in a row. And also don't forget to give them the item that they requested after each correct response. I know this was a lot. That's the last slide. But, this is the way that they're going to learn, and we're going to have to build it skill by skill by skill so that those communication skills are really strong and we get a good base, a solid base of communication skills and vocabulary. Eventually, we can start working on navigating menus. So that means categories. So starting at the home screen and saying, what do you want? And then having them touch the right category and then the right button to tell us what they want. And then after that, we can work on adding, from the home screen, touching the right category and then making sequencing, buttons together to create, phrases or sentences. So we could have them say, you could say, what do you want? They know how to get to the menu, get to the right category. So they say they want food and they want to eat chips. So they could go to the food category and then touch a button that says I want, and then one that says to eat, and then one that says chips. So that's the long-term goal, is putting that all together and creating more complex messages over time. I hope this was informative. I know it was a lot. Next week, I'm going to do another one similar to this about how to teach them to navigate the menu, or navigate to the right category and touch the right button. And then the week after that, we'll do the one where they navigate and then do 2 buttons. So I want, and then the item. All right. Well, thank you for your time. And, if you're still with me, please like and subscribe.